Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Laura Hill podcast. I'm Laura Hill, and I have got the most exciting guest to talk to today. I met Katie Braden years ago on a Sophia Hilton course. In fact, I think it was the first course I did at Not Another Academy. And I just kept watching her and thinking, oh my God, I need this woman in my life. She is like a PR guru. And I feel like this episode is going to give everybody so much help. So thank you so much for joining me, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me.
The pleasure is literally all mine. One of the reasons I got into podcasting was because I thought there's all these people that I want to ask questions to. And if I just rang you up and asked you for an hour of your time, it would cost me a lot of money.
That is so smart. That's like, we're literally 10 seconds in. It's like tip number 1, start a podcast, ask the questions. Like, that's brilliant. Yeah.
So I'm going to start. If people don't know who you are, I really want your history, how and why you got into PR.
So this story always takes so much longer than anticipated because it is just like the most random story ever. It makes no sense. I get a lot of students like DMing me or like emailing me like, how do you get into what you're doing? And like, did you do a comms degree and like all this stuff? And I'm like, no, I did not. I'm probably not the person to ask. So basically, I started off, I was a professional dancer. I moved to London to do dance school, did all that jazz, literally. And then I was like, right, I am not going home when I finish dance school. I'm going to stay in London. So I ended up working in a little lingerie boutique in Islington, which is like the most beautiful place in the world. But I was doing a sales job and it was like a really exclusive boutique, so it was like quite boring because there's not much going on during the day. Anyway, I then randomly decided to read Kelly Catrone's book, which Kelly Catrone, if you don't know, is like an iconic like American PR woman. She's often like the only reference that people have when you say like, oh, a PR, fashion PR. She was in The City, which was a spin-off of The Hills, which is like an American like reality TV show, and she's just incredible. Anyway, she has a book called If You Have to Cry, Go Outside, and it is a fantastic book. I just like resonated with it so hard. Like everything she said in it, I was like, this is me. Like I feel like I need to be a PR, which is like, okay, girl, like fine. So I followed her on Twitter. And the next day she tweeted, all my London PR girls check out, and then she tagged an agency, which is like the most random thing ever. So I basically just Googled the agency, and it turned out that the boutique I was working at was like down the road from the agency. It was like right there. And obviously, to anyone who doesn't live in London, everyone's like, okay, it's close to you. But like when something's close to you in London, it's like, what? So I emailed them and I was like, hey, I have absolutely no experience. But all I want to do is like be around you and like shadow you and like just soak it all in. So they emailed me back, which was like almost fell off my chair. And they were like, yeah, you can come in. We're actually looking for like interns and assistants right now. But they didn't tell me like where to go or like when to come or like if I had an appointment or like anything. They were just like, yeah, we're looking, but didn't give me any information. So I was like, right. The next day, I just turned up at their offices at like 1:00 in the afternoon, and I just lied and said I had an appointment with the director of the agency. They were all like, obviously it's our mistake, like, because they just assumed they were in the wrong. And then I ended up in a meeting with the director of the agency, and she just so happened to be looking for an assistant. So I just randomly got that job. But these were the days before being a free intern was illegal. So you can't work for free anymore. But back in the day, you could. So I was basically working in this agency like 3 days a week, I think it was, or 4 days a week for free. And then the rest of the time I was working like in the evenings and on the weekends to like pay my rent. And this went on for about 6 weeks. And then they basically pulled me into a meeting and they were like, this isn't working. Like, we need you here all the time. Like, we need you here Monday to Friday. Because PR, especially in fashion agencies, it's very, very fast paced and it's impossible to keep track. Like, I'm sure you feel the same. Like, when you miss a couple of days in the salon, you come back in and you're like, what is life? Like, it moves so fast. So I was like, okay, fine. I want to do that. But I was like, you have to pay me because I can't afford to be here Monday to Friday for free. So she was like, fine, I'll match what you're being paid in your boutique job. And that was basically the start of my career. And then I just all my experience that I have, I basically had a wish list in my head of all of the PR people who I really admired and all the agencies that I really loved. And I was like, I'm just going to work for them all and just soak it all in. And it's you can't be a PR, it's a full immersive experience. You can't be half in, you're either in or you're out. So I just learned extremely quickly and then ended up just snowballing. And yeah, here we are. So that's the story of how I got into it, basically.
My God, that's so amazing.
It's such a random one.
Yeah. But if you think about it, the sort of four things in there is you knew you want to do it and you didn't let anything stop you. You literally went in and you lied your way through the door. You worked for free. I
Yeah.
get it. It's unethical to work for free now, but a lot
Yeah.
of people, the reason they got to where they did is because they just went, I will literally do anything and I'll do it for free so that I can, because the value is in the learning, right?
Yeah, and I knew I've just finished dance school, I've just had the degree experience, and there's no way that I could A, even fathom going back to university, or B, afford to go back to university. So it was how do I learn on the job when I don't have time to kind of do a formal education? Especially with something like communication, it's obviously with something like hairdressing, it's completely different because you actually need science and technical skills. So it's you can't just, I'm just learning on the job. You need some form of formal education. But for PR, our job is communication. So it's so I always joke that it's probably not a very funny joke to people who are doing it, but when you do a comms degree, by the time you graduate, what you've learned is irrelevant because it moves so fast and it changes so fast. So it was that wasn't an option for me. So I just had to figure it out another way.
That's so good. That is so good. I love that. Obviously, this is a podcast for hairdressers, but I could literally ask you questions about that all day. What an incredible story.
Yeah, it's wild. It's a bit wild. When I think back to it, when I take myself back to the time, I'm what was I thinking? Was I okay? I just was I'm just gonna go and do it. Imagine doing that now. You'd overthink everything, wouldn't you? And you'd be oh, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should confirm the meeting. No, that didn't even cross my mind.
No.
I know.
I love that.
To be young and stupid again.
Or just take a really big chance, and if there's something you want to do, just 100% commit and go for it.
Yeah, there is one thing about my younger self is she loved a risk, and it's so funny because everyone who knows me now, I am the most calculated, very not really a crazy risk takey person. Everything has to have rhyme and reason, and I think everything through. But I think that's off the back of my younger self just being sheets to the wind, who just do it, it's fine. So yeah, both sides of the coin.
Yeah, you've taken the chances and now you're right, I've made my life, I'm just gonna be settled in it. So for people who are wondering or confused, what is PR and why do people need it?
Okay, so This is such a chunky question, and I always preface by saying that PR can be like an infinite number of things, and any PR will probably we'll all disagree with each other on what it is. But I personally see my role as two things. So in a nutshell, I'm a storyteller and I'm also a connector. So I basically come in and tell stories, and then I'm also the sort of connector and creator of situations and vibes, if you will. But PR in a sort of more technical sense, obviously it stands for public relations. I say obviously, people don't know that. So it stands for public relations. And what it is it basically is marketing, but for free, if that makes sense. So you've got advertising, which is marketing that you pay for. So when you see all the ads in the magazines, that's paid for advertising. But then when you see the features in magazines that's oh, top products we love this week, blah, blah, blah. Yes, some of that will be paid for, but a lot of the time that is what we call organic editorial. So those spaces are given via the relationships between the journalists and the PRs, connecting with the brands, connecting with people's stories. We just basically make sure that people know about stuff that's happening. Because if a tree falls in a forest, nobody hears it.
So you're the people that have to go and, like the town crier, that has to go and say...
Yeah, I always say that when we were tribal and we were cavemen and we were all sat around the fire, it was the PRs who were telling the stories and starting the rumors, and they're the reason why we're not sure about what really happened in history, because they were jazzing it up all the time to keep it entertaining. So I feel those were the original PRs.
I love that. That's
That's
so
how,
good.
that's where I think, that's where my lineage lies. I was around the fire telling my stories, and then they're getting passed on, and now years later we have all these random facts that may or may not be true, but it's a cracking story nonetheless.
I love that. I have a cousin who always says never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
And that is facts. That is a fact. I'm not saying you should lie. I'm just saying it needs to be good, make it entertaining.
Yeah. And he's the funniest guy I've ever met in my life. So I think it works.
Exactly. You have to just go for it.
Yeah. So I feel like I've got lots of hairdressers listening to this podcast. So for hairdressers, why would PR be helpful for them?
Okay, so many reasons. And I think people get really stuck in thinking that PR equals press, which it does, but it also is so much more than that, especially now in this fun society we live in, where brand deals and ambassadorships and sponsorships and all that jazz are a thing. So I think PR for hairdressers is really actually multifaceted. So obviously you have your industry PR, which are our trade titles, which basically are magazines for hairdressers and for brands. They are within our closed industry. You have those guys, and where their value lies is number one, boosting your reputation within the industry, boosting your reputation so brands are thinking they've got clout in the industry, so they have selling power to other hairdressers. So it's attracting brands in that way. And also, when it comes down to things show opportunities or award opportunities, having somebody who's regularly featured or as I say, has that sort of industry clout, that's going to help you when they're deciding who's going to go on stage at a certain show or who's going to host this thing, or when you come to put your award entries in for certain things, it's oh, I know this person because I've seen them XYZ, oh, they're the ambassador for this, and da, 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 da. So it all kind of ties together. obviously you've got your ambassadorships, which can essentially be like an entire income for a person. Like, I work on a lot of ambassador deals, both on the side of the hairdresser and also on the side of the brands. And when you see those contracts, it's like, this is life changing, actually. People are like, oh, I'm not bothered about products and this, that, and the other. But it's like, you should be. You really should be, because it's essentially like another strand of your business. And then obviously under that, you've got sponsored stylists. So like having products for free. Again, if you've got those free products, you're then making money off something you didn't pay for. So again, it's another stream of income. Then you've got sponsored posts. So like your content creation side of things. Like, the list is so endless, and I'm seeing so much conversation at the moment in the industry about having like multiple streams of income. And I think industry PR in particular is very, there's so much opportunity there if you want it. Like, I was speaking to a lot of hairdressers for a project a couple of weeks ago, and so many of them were saying like, oh yeah, I only do like 2 days behind the chair now, and the rest of the time I do content creation. And I was like, that's so interesting how we've like evolved in that way, and people are structuring their lives differently and their income differently. So that's kind of like on the industry side. And then you have the consumer side, which is essentially like all your regular media, like your Vogue, your Elle, your Glamour, your whatever you read. And then that's sort of like shifting your name out of the industry and bringing it into like mainstream, if you will. So like, who's commenting on trends, like who's the go-to for like, oh, I'm talking about a bob, this person says this about it, sort of vibe. So again, that's like very heavy on press coverage. But again, it's like you've then got your consumer brands that are outside of hair. So like a lot of I say a lot, a few hairdressers now are taking like alcohol brand sponsorships or like clothing brand sponsorships. So that's like moving out of our little arena and into like the wild world where there's all these other things, and it's all exactly the same, just on like a much bigger scale. But yeah, I feel like I've covered all of the things that it could possibly be, but I'm 100% sure I've probably left something out because it's just so broad.
That is huge, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
That is
massive.
so for people who are trying and not getting anywhere. So
Yeah,
people who are like, I want to be a brand ambassador, or I want to be sponsored by a brand, or I want my pictures in magazines, and
yeah.
like, how do I become one of these experts in Hairdressers Journal? That's the job you do.
So this is the job I do, but something that is really important is that you're actually interesting first. Because so many people come to me, brands as well, and they're like, we need you to PR us. And it's like, okay, what have you got? And it's like, tumbleweeds. It's like, I have no point of view, I have nothing to say, I've got nothing going on. And it's like, well, I'm good, but I'm not that good. That working with a PR, you can develop like brand and stories together, but it has to start with something. Like, there's got to be a bit of a spark there for me to then grow. I always explain it as like, if you've got something to say, and it comes back to like your town crier analogy. Like, I'm the one standing there with the megaphone. Like, I'm the one helping you reach the masses. But if you're silent, there's nothing coming out of that megaphone, and I can't do that for you. So yeah, I think it all starts with like taking a hard look in the mirror and saying, am I interesting? Like, is what I'm doing interesting? Is it different? Is it true to me? Because if the answer's no, then you're not going to get very far.
So do you go through that with people? Like, do you have, if I came to you and I said, Katie, I want you to PR me, and you
Mm.
said, well, what's the thing that's unique about you? And I said, I have no idea. Is there like a process you go through with people to help people discover that?
Yes, yes. I actually, so shameless plug, I just launched, well, I say just the start of the year. In my mind, I'm still in January. It was just, but it wasn't just, it was months ago. I launched a package, which I've never done before, called the Publicist Package. And basically what this is I've made a package to make PR accessible to individual talent, because obviously the cost of PR is expensive. The amount of work you have to put into a brand is extensive. But having access to individual talent and having access to me on a smaller scale that's more affordable, but still having that like sounding board and that help, I thought was going to be really valuable. And I also wanted to open it up outside of the hairdressing industry. So I started working with this incredible client who is a tattoo artist. And to me, I've been tattooed by her before, so I followed her work for years, and I think she's so interesting and she has such an incredible point of view, and like her work is so unique. And I was like, right, let's bring you into this package. Like, we're going to do an hour call. And basically, the purpose of the hour call is for them to tell me their story in their own way. And you could tell, like, throughout the call, she was like, you know, like, I've done this, but it's not that interesting. And, like, she was really, like, you could tell that she felt like, I'm not interesting, I've got nothing to say, I've got no point of view. And you could feel the sort of like insecurity and like a little bit of deflation there. And that was that. We did our hour call. I then went away and wrote like a general press release about her. So that is like me basically taking what she's given me and like making it into a story. And I sent it back to her for her to have a look at and just check that she was like happy with how I've sort of positioned her and what I've said about her. And she came back and she was like, my God, you've made me sound so interesting. And I was like, yeah, I have. But at the same time, like, you are interesting. It's just about sometimes, like, we live in our own bodies and we live in our own heads and inside our own worlds. So sometimes what is so boring to us is fascinating to other people. So it's about like having that outside perspective to come in and be like, right, this, and this is gold, and then like packaging it into this like amazing, like cohesive story. And 9 times out of 10, I will be able to do that. There are instances, I've never had it with a person, but with brands where I've looked at the brand and gone, I'm so sorry, this is deathly boring. But it, you know, that's one thing though with PRs, like kind of like off topic, but kind of on. I genuinely believe that half of the success when it comes to PR is having a good portfolio of clients. So saying no to the ones that you think have no source is actually really beneficial.
That's amazing. So, I just want can I delve a bit more into the personal brand thing? Is that okay?
Go for it. Absolutely, yeah.
Because I feel like the personal brand thing, it is really hard, and I feel like people will think there really is nothing interesting about me. But if you want more clients, or if you want to become like just those basic things, if you want more clients, you do really need nowadays. You really need a personal brand, don't you?
Yeah. And I have been saying this now for about 2 years, but I think that clients and consumers, you know, people who are looking for services and even people who are looking for education, you know, hairdressers and even brands, like we're moving away from like heritage. And what I mean by that is like, I'll book in with this hairdresser because my mum goes there, or my whole family's always gone to this one salon, so I'm going to go there. Like, we don't choose things like that anymore, and we don't book things like that anymore because everything else is so much more accessible. So we're choosing brands, salons, experts, like people who we buy into and people we give our money to like friends. So it's more like when I see a brand, like if I'm going to buy a lip gloss and I see a brand, I'm like, okay, do you have the same morals as me? Like, do you like the same things that I do? Do we have the same aesthetic? Like, it's all these things that when you're sort of looking in the pub for a friend, it's exactly the same process. Not that anyone looks for friends in the pubs anymore, but you know what I mean? It's like when you're in a party and you're like, oh, they're my people because you're all wearing like a similar thing. That's how we're choosing brands, and that's how we're choosing salons, and therefore that's how like we're choosing who we connect with. And I think being yourself and being really clear about like what you do, what you offer, what you love, you'll then attract your friends in a really organic way. And I think that gets stuck when people aren't necessarily like showing who they are, or they're just like regurgitating other things they've seen online and they're not being true to themselves. Like then their message gets confused and then they're like, I don't know why I'm not getting any clients. And it's like, well, nobody knows who you are. Like you're just showing us like balayage after balayage and nobody gets to know you that way. Yeah, I don't know if I just answered your question or if I just made my own question there.
No, you.
I was like, that's what I think, but don't know if that answered the question.
No, that so did. Oh my God, Katie, that's so. Because, so here's the confusing thing, right? From a
Yeah,
hairdresser's point of view. A lot of the advice, a lot of the things people are selling to do with social media is about this is what the algorithm likes,
yeah,
or so you have to do this,
mm,
or this is a trend, so you have to copy this trend. Do
yeah,
you know, like simply like, do you know, like the dancing trend where like everybody was just doing these little dances, or the pointing trend where they're doing the like little pointing around themselves.
yeah. I love that one.
But it's that is just copying everybody else. So that's really hard, isn't it? Because then how do you stand out as an individual if you're
Yeah,
just being told, well, you have to copy everyone else, so you just have to do what the algorithm tells you to?
yeah. So, I love this question. So I am a huge believer that no one knows really what's going to do well and what's not going to do well on social media, because we don't work behind the scenes at those platforms. So like I can tell you all day long like, oh, I think this is going to be good, or I think that's going to be good, but you never really know. And I think when you listen to like big influencers and big content creators talk about algorithm and like what does well and what doesn't, it's always so unexpected. Like they'll do just like a random video and it'll just go viral and they're like, well, that happened. So we can kind of like bin off anything that's like, oh, you should do this for the algorithm, because we don't know what the algorithm's going to be doing in the next 10 minutes. It could all change in half an hour. TikTok could be banned tomorrow. We don't know. So there's a sense of like 50%, I think, of social media is just doing what you want to do. If it does well, great, do more of it. If it doesn't, great, bin it or try it again in a different way. Like, just do what you want to do. But then the other 50%, I'm going to contradict myself here, but it is going to come back around, is doing what is in the mix. So like for example, your pointing videos or your dancing videos, or like if there's a trending sound or whatever it is, like there has to be a marriage of I'm doing what I want to do, but this is what the platform is doing, and then we kind of meet in the middle, because you are existing on a platform, so you can't be like completely blind and pig-headed and be like, this is what I want to do and I'm only going to do that, because there has to be a meeting of minds when it comes to when you're existing on Instagram or you're existing on TikTok. But the one thing I will say is when you are participating in these trends and doing these, sounds or, pointing or whatever it is, it has to be done in your way. Like whenever I approach a trend, okay, a really good example is like a trend that's going around at the moment. And I think it's from a Taylor Swift song. And the lyrics are like, you would never last an hour in the asylum that raised me. And that's like the clip of the song, right? And it's like people do a picture and they go, you will never last an hour, and then the picture swipes in the asylum that raised me, and the swipe is like their like trauma from like a kid, like nothing horrific, but like for example for me, I put my picture and then it swiped to a ballet studio, because it was like any ballet kids will know that it's like a niche thing. So like people were doing it with like MySpace or like I don't know. Like it's just typical when you need an example, you can't think of one. But Like, for example, that trend, you can do that, but you can completely make it your own. So it's, again, that's a perfect example of meeting the platform halfway. And also, people who follow you, specifically on TikTok, are following for you. So they want to see how you do it. They don't want to see you do it. They want to see how you do it. So it's about like adding that bit of who am I? What am I doing? And the algorithm can actually help you figure that out. Like, if you just post a bunch of stuff that you like, the algorithm will tell you what people want to see because it'll do better. So then you're like, oh, cool, people like me for that aspect. Let's do more of that. Like, I have a thing on my personal page where, like, if I post certain outfits that, like, look a certain way, they do better than if I post, like, other stuff. People are like, no, not interested in that. We want to see this. And it's like, oh, you want to see this? We'll do more of this. And then, yeah, I think that's how you have to do it because nobody really knows what's going on, let's be honest.
That's such a good answer. That feels like a weight is lifted because like everybody's so worried about the algorithm, aren't they?
I know, and like I say to everyone as well, think back to 5 years ago. We didn't even know TikTok wasn't even invented. So like you can't hold on to like, I have to do this, I should be doing this because next week, next year, 5 years time is the landscape is going to be completely different. So the best thing you can be is free, nimble, and flexible. And that's it.
I love that. That's amazing. And so if people are like, well, that's great, but I don't know who I am. How do people even begin that process? Like you were saying, should people just write down a list of what they like, what they don't like, their achievements, their history? Like how can people even start that?
Yeah, so okay, a great exercise is like if aliens invaded the earth and they come to you and they're like, and you've got to like be like, I'm this person and this is what I do, and like explaining it as if they've never met you and they have no clue. They don't know what a balayage is. Like they have no idea. So like in very like layman's terms, like super simple, like I would absolutely write it down. Like the same way as if you're trying to make a decision and you've got to make a pros and cons list, like write it down and then sit with it and refine it. So I would write down all my stuff, and then I'm such a fan of sleeping on things. Like I have this idea that my brain is like chicken and it needs to marinate before I cook it. So if I need to like do something really big, like figure out who I am, like I'm gonna let that stuff marinate in there for a little while, and then you'll come back to it and you can refine it. And also, exactly like I said before, it's having that flexibility of allowing change, and like we're humans, so like next week I'm probably going to have like a new interest or like something else that I want to add or change. So like coming back to that list is really nice because you can then like refresh, like, oh, that doesn't resonate with me anymore, or I've changed to this, and that's like on being a human being. But yeah, I would just really start with listing it out. And I know the alien thing sounds silly, but it kind of like draws you out of your what's assumed about you. Like, oh, everyone, I know I'm a hairdresser. No, write down, I am a hairdresser. Like, I am a session stylist. I am a colorist. And like, make it so like stripped back because as soon as you strip it back, you'll start to find like the gold in it. And until you strip it back, you can't refine it.
That's amazing. I'm not even joking. As soon as we finish this podcast, I'm going to do a mind map of
Yeah.
who am I. That's so good.
I do it regularly. I do it regularly just for like I like to have like personal clarification for absolutely no reason. Like I just like to be like, okay, at this moment this is who I am. And then in like 6 months time I come back and I'm like, okay, who am I now? And I just enjoy refining and changing. And so like if I ended up on Vogue and they're like, who are your 3 style icons? I can be like, I know exactly who they are because I refined it last week. Like, you know what I mean? I think it's a really good exercise just to do generally, but when you're trying to figure out your point of view, especially when it comes to being a content creator and, you know, making stuff, then yeah, it's a really good exercise to continue to do all the time.
That's so good. And I love that you've, like, with that question, you just made it like a cosmopolitan quiz. You're like, who are your 3 star icons? Like, you could go on, couldn't you? Like, 3 favorite TV programs,
Yeah.
I don't know, whatever it is. My mind's gone blank as well. You really could, couldn't
Tea or
you?
coffee, pizza or fries, like it's all that. Like that is part of who you are, and like it's always a good idea to do those, like, you know, those like 90s girl magazines where it was like, are you pink or purple? And then you have to like follow it down, and then it's like, you are a star. And it's like, that is a way of like knowing yourself and like figuring it out. So there's no shame in the game.
No, that's amazing. That is so helpful, Kate. Like, that's really, really helpful. That's so helped me. Because I find that a really difficult question. Who am I? And
Yeah.
how you then come across on social media as that person. It's when
Yeah.
you're doing a balayage. Like, I think a lot of the who am I questions I ask tend to have a lot to do with my values. And then I'm like, how do I get across that I'm an honest person when I'm putting a foil in?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel you. But then it's kind of like, okay, the only person who is going to do a foil like you is you.
Mm.
And it's like standing in that. And I think because, like, I think hairdressers on social media get really stuck in, this is what I should be doing. And like, if you're doing a voiceover, like, this is how it should sound. Or even if you're showing a technique, like, this is exactly right and this is how I should be doing it. And it's like, if you kind of like rip that apart, again, like stripping it back, like, if I'm gonna just do this as me, like, how would I do it? And maybe it is the same as like 70 other people, but 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be. And it's about giving yourself the space to be like, I don't have to do the same as everyone else. I don't have to. Like, I can do this exact trend, but it's going to be completely different because I would like to do it in this way.
Yeah, I love that. I wonder if this might be a good time to just name drop a few of your brands, because this conversation about strong branding will make so much sense when people know who you work for, because their brands are so strong and really stand out.
Yeah, so I have Ms. Sophia Hilton, just a small, you know, back alley hairdresser. I don't know if anyone will really know her. And then Not Another Salon, obviously the icons that are. Kevin Murphy, Silk London, which are a gorgeous 100% silk hair care brand that are like very consumer focused and stocked worldwide. I have Call Creatives, which is my gorgeous non-profit makeup tool brand. I have Spectrum One hair extensions, and the beautiful Katie Grimshaw. And I also look after like all of the Katie Grimshaw empire, as in like the salon, scalp clinic, all that jazz. I'm not working with them anymore, but I was with Innerlux and Cara Straight, now Fabric, for like 6 or 7 years. I was on the team for Crazy Colour. I was on the team for 11 Australia. Yeah, I'm just trying to think if I've like missed any Whopper stoppers. I don't think I have. But if I have, guys, I'm sorry.
But that's just such a good example of what you do. Like, I feel like a name drop sometimes is so good for context, because all of those brands are so strong, and
Yeah,
the minute you hear them, like an image comes up, or like something's going to come up where you're like, oh yeah, I totally know that brand. I know their colours, I know the way it looks, I know the way it sounds, I know the way it feels. And
yeah,
that is what hairdressers need to do, right? That's what we need to do. When someone says Sarah something in Cardiff, you go, oh my God, I know something about her.
yeah. Like for me, when I'm sitting with my brand hat on and I'm looking for like potential brand ambassadors or like hosts for events or like sponsored stylists or people I want to pay for content. Like the people who come to mind are people who are doing exactly that. Like they have a personal brand, they have a point of view, like they're doing stuff on social media that is very like true to them and specific to them, and it's different to everybody else. And they're not different to everybody else because they've gone in thinking I'm going to be different to everybody else. They've just gone in and like really stood in like who they are and what they do and what they believe. And I think those are the people who I think are really like leading the way in the industry right now.
That's such a good tip. So you don't have to think what is different about me. You don't have to think how can I be different from everyone else. You just have to think what's unique about me, and you have to stand in that and really stick to that.
Yeah, it's really about being completely honest with yourself. And I know that sounds like such a like over the top statement for like creating a TikTok about a balayage, but I think a lot of the time we are not honest with ourselves, and then we're just like, oh, I'll just do what this is, whatever everybody else is doing because that's what I should be doing and whatever. But it's like really truly honestly, if we answer the questions, who are we, like, you know, what are our morals, what are our ethoses, like what do we love, what do we not love, those things will automatically resonate. And then like I hate the saying, but your vibe attracts your tribe is like there's not a truer thing that could be said. So how are you supposed to attract a tribe when nobody knows your vibe?
I love that. That's so good. What a mic drop moment.
I
Yeah,
mean,
thank you.
I think I need it on a t-shirt, but I would never put it on a t-shirt because it is like the worst quote in the world, but it's so true. And I keep saying it, and every time I say it, I'm like, oh, I hate myself, but I can't explain it in any other way.
I love it. So if someone does want to do that, like the ambassadorship or be sponsored by a brand, like what do they need to do? What are the kind of steps to go from doing a balayage behind a chair to getting noticed by a brand? Like what do they need to do?
Um, so I think, and everybody will answer this differently, so this is very like a personal opinion to me, but I think building the relationship with the brand and with the decision makers of the brand is really vital. And this kind of comes back to a very controversial topic of the whole how I was saying that I worked for free in the beginning to gain my experience. So there's a bit of a culture at the moment, not um, specifically with hairdressers, with influencers just generally, and that is that people will not try products or people won't accept gifts unless there is promise of money. So, like, I'll reach out to someone and be like, hey, like, really love your page. I'd love to send you like an introductory PR box just for you to like see some products, like try some things, like see if there's any like, is there any love there? Like, can we build a relationship here? Like, let's see if there's any spark, you know? And I'll often get a response, and I must say, 9 times out of 10, it is not from the creator themselves. It's often from agents or managers. So, people who have agents and managers, if you don't like this, double check that your manager's not doing this because they do it a lot. They'll come back immediately and say, like, oh, is this for a paid partnership? And my response has been the same for years. I go back and say, we don't consider paid partnerships, and I won't take a paid partnership opportunity to my client unless you've at least tried the products. And I know that seems like there'll be two sides of the coin here. People will be like, you have to be paid for your work, yada, 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 which I 100% agree with. And I think everyone deserves to be paid for their content. But on the other hand, how can I pay you for something? Or even like in a position that I'm in, I'm like a middleman, I'm a connector. So I'm not like, for example, I'm not Mr. Kevin Murphy. Like I can't say, no worries, Louise, like we'll pay you. So every time I get money, I have to go to my client and say, we need to pay this person for this reason. And I go with a figure and I have to justify it. So I have to pitch it essentially. So imagine I'm going to my client and I'm saying, right, guys, Kevin, I need like thousands of pounds of your hard-earned cash for Louise to do a paid partnership. She's never tried anything. She has no rapport with the brand at all. You don't know who she is. I don't really know who she is, but I would love £1,000 of your cash. Like, you have to think about it from that perspective. Whereas I have some people, and again, I am not promoting working for free, but I have people who, like, they'll try out the products, they'll send me feedback. They might post a little something on their Instagram stories, and then months later they're doing like a get ready with me and they're like, oh, I actually use this every day, and it's something that I gifted them 6 months ago. And then we'll see them at an event, and then there's like, you know, there's that's a relationship. And I'm not saying you should be doing fully sponsored style content for free, but it's just like having a genuine love for a product or a brand resonates with the brand, and the brand will see it because they'll see the tags, they'll see you at the events, they'll see the emails, like they'll appreciate the feedback. And also when they're working with like PRs like me, we do like reports, so like weekly reports, monthly reports, and if your name's coming up all the time, and then in 6 months time I say, hey, can I have some money for this person because I want to do this, they'll go, yeah, we love her, give Louise the money, you know? So it all has to make sense, and I think there has to be a genuine connection. Of course, there are brands out there that have so much money, they don't care, and they're like, have 100 grand, spend it on whoever you want, which is a PR's dream, because then when Louise's manager emails me and says, is this a paid thing? And I can say, yes, like that's great. But with a lot of brands that I work with, so I work with a lot of founder-owned and smaller companies, so I'm not working with like big corporate conglomerate. You know, there has to be some sort of something. There's got to be a little bit of source there. So I think keeping that in mind, and again, being honest with yourself and writing down like, I really love this brand, and this brand, and then like focusing on it is going to do way better than like blanketing your approach and being like, I'll go with whoever takes me. You know, I think being strong in your opinion and, you know, having a genuine love for things will always come across, and you'll always get attention that way, as opposed to like, I don't know if I can say this. Well, I probably can because it's not a swear word, but being like a bit of a brand slut, that's not recommended because we can see it. Like we can feel it. And it's like when you click on when you see like on social media like, oh, so and so has tagged this brand, and then you click on it and it's like 300,000 brands, like every brand you've ever heard of, it's immediately going to be like disregarded because it's not genuine. So I think essentially it's the same answer as the last one, isn't it? It's like being honest, being genuine, and standing in what you love, your beliefs, and your vibe attracts your tribe, your vibe will attract the brands, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that is good. Yeah, and yeah, you're right, it is the same answer. However, there's loads in there that's absolute gold. And interestingly, and I do still see this quite a lot on Instagram, which is I always find surprising, that I'll get tagged in a post because they've been on a course at not another salon. So I'll get tagged in the post as the educator. And then when all the tags come up, there are like 20 or 30 different hair companies in there, like L'Oreal, Wella, Innolux, Crazy Colour, Kevin Murphy. And you think, they can't have used all those products.
No. And also another thing that people don't think of, but I think of first off the bat because I work for these brands and I know how they think, is like the people you're tagging are all competitors. Like they're competing with each other. So you're tagging like a brand, and then like the biggest competitor of that brand are also tagged. It's like, that's not going to make sense. And the worst thing that anybody can ever do is doing that with magazines, because like, you know, some people, there was that trend of like tagging every magazine. Like, I get it, you want them to see your stuff, like I understand it, but they're all competing titles. Like, they are all, and I don't mean like in a nasty way, but like they are all competitors with each other, and they're not going to feature the same thing as their competitor, and they're not going to like being tagged in the same thing as their competitor, because then they can see that you're just like, anybody take me. Like, it's the same thing as like being blanketed about brands. Like, if you have something that you think this is really good for Creative Head, speak to them. Like, be like, tag Creative Head in the caption, Creative Head, this is for you because of this reason. Be targeted and be relentless. And that's the only way you're going to get attention, because if it's like every single magazine is tagged, every single magazine will open it and go, discard. So it's just pointless. It's like a waste of energy.
So pick one and be relentless.
Yeah, and actually, like, consume stuff. So, for example, like, okay, let's take Creative Head as an example. It's as if I'm being sponsored. I'm not. It's just, I was reading an email from them before this, so they're on my mind. Like, pick up the magazine, read it, go online. What have they been featuring recently? Go on their Instagram. What type of stuff are they posting? And think, like, it's the same way as PRs are trained to think. Like, if you look at an editorial page and you think, right, I've got something that I think can fit into that. Like, for example, one of the trade mags, Pro Hair, they do a page every month called Business Memos. And it's like bits of like business stuff. So like business business advice, or like podcast recommendations, or like stuff that's business focused. So if you've got something that you're like, oh, I've got a business thing, like, hey, Pro Hair, put this on Business Memo. And they're like, they actually know we do Business Memo. Like, what a good start. You know, like, being specific in what you want and why you want it. I think that statement works across like getting clients, getting brands, getting press, getting attention on social media. Like, what do you want? Why do you want it? And that like takes everything out of the equation, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's so good. I think that's quite a hard question for you, as hard as we are literally racking up the hard questions here. Who am I? What do I want? And why do I want it? Are
Absolutely.
two, they're hard ones, aren't they? They should be so simple. Like, I am 42 years old. I should know who I am, what I want, and why I want it. And I have no clue.
Yeah, but I think, when was the last time you gave yourself space to really mull those questions?
Yeah.
Because it's not something we think about day to day, because we're so busy doing. So sometimes we have to like disconnect and give ourselves a little minute to be like, right, who am I? Because maybe you did that when you were 25, but those answers are going to be completely different now. So it's so important to like give yourself that really like self-indulgent space, to figure it out, and also to come back to it, and then come back to it again and again and again, and keep refining.
Yeah, I love that. The other thing you just reminded me of, when you said about the business memos in the Pro Hair magazine, that you have to know what you want to say and you have to know where to put it. It's a bit like the old classified ads, isn't it? Like, if you're selling a piano, you're not going to put it in the looking for love section.
Exactly. Like, it has to make sense. And I think a lot of the time, and this is purely because like hairdressers specifically are so busy. Like, I have this conversation with hairdressers constantly where they're like, I'm squeezing in social media, like I have no time. And then by the time they get to post something, it's like, bang, 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 like cookie cutter caption, like tag my 30 people that I always tag, and then they're like, tick, done, back to my client. So I understand that like social media posting is not this like amazing, like, oh, I'm just going to really think about this. And like, it's not the reality for a lot of people. But I think unless you have something meaning to say or to post or to share, or like a point of view, then I would rather not post than do like a cookie cutter, like boring, 30 brands tagged just because that's what you've been doing for the last 2 years. Like, you kind of have to put a stop on it and again have that like reflection time sometimes. Yeah, and figure out like if you want to be in the looking for love section or if you want to be somewhere else, you've got to give yourself a second to like apply logic, you know?
Yeah. Like, Katie, thank you so much. That's so good. This
You're
is
so
like,
welcome.
this is what I said at the beginning. Like, I feel like I'm getting to pick your brains, and you're so amazing at your job. And
Oh, thank you.
I'm so grateful you're doing this, Katie. Thank you so much.
Honestly, this is so fun for me. Like, this is such a wonderful like activity in my day. It's such a treat. It's like
That segues quite nicely into your podcast, because you're actually giving away this advice for free
yeah.
on a podcast.
Yes. So I have a podcast called The PR Department, and it's a real mixed bag of stuff because it's literally like I have no guests. It's just me, myself, and I. And I just talk for like half an hour, 45 minutes about whatever I feel is interesting. And that may be like PR news or like what I think where I think influencers are going, or like something weird that's happened in like my behind the scenes PR life. And it's all like it's very much around like what we've been talking about today, to be honest. It's just me like sharing my PR philosophies and my opinion, always from a PR perspective. So if you are interested in that, it's a nice like easy listen, I would say. It's not too like, it's not really super hardcore educational. It's just kind of like my musings, if you will.
And you're hilarious. Like,
Oh no, don't tell me that.
to you. I listen to you in my car, and
Yeah,
I laugh loudly, like as
good.
I'm driving along. People must think I'm nuts when I stop at traffic lights. You are really funny.
Well,
So
imagine being me. People think I'm actually insane. I'll take it though. I'll take it. This is the thing. I just think like all of this is so unserious. Like social media and like, dyeing hair and doing PR and like press. It's just so unserious. Like there's never any reason for it to be like this big, daunting, like terrifying thing. Like all of this that we discuss and everything I discuss on the podcast, like it's always fun. Like, isn't this like this fun little silly thing that they were doing through life? Like, it's just how funny. How funny that this is my job. How weird.
it's so lovely that you put it like that, because it can feel so big and daunting and scary, can't it? Like the
Yeah.
social media pressures, and have I posted enough this week? And
Yeah.
like someone put a mean comment on something that I said, or it can feel so serious and so pressurized. So that's such an
Yeah.
amazing reminder.
Yeah, honestly, every time I feel a little bit like, or like the pressure, or like I feel too full, I'm like, I just take a second and I'm like, isn't this so silly? Like, isn't this so funny and hilarious that I wake up every morning and I'm like, let me like look at my magazines and let me like see who's like really cool on Instagram. Like, how funny that that's my job and my life. And I don't know, like it's just, yeah, it's so unserious, truly.
It is amazing. I mean, yeah, and it sounds so awesome as well. It sounds so amazing that you do what you
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, I'm really, really big into gratitude, and that is like the most, again, I hate saying that word because it's such like a key, like, be grateful. Like, it's so, I hate, it makes me feel like a bit sick, but there's no other way to describe it. Like, I just think, you have to just be like, isn't this so cool that we get to talk about hair trends and we get to tag each other on Instagram, and like I can see someone doing hair in America. There used to be a time where we only had one radio station. So
Yeah, that's so true. Like, we're so lucky to have it. It can feel like such a burden on people,
yeah,
especially like stressed out salon owners who are trying to do a million things and
yeah,
do the Instagram. But we are really lucky, aren't we? And
yeah.
I can remember going on an Alan Austin Smith course
Mm-hmm.
years ago, And he said, if someone told you you could have a 10-minute advert on a channel that everybody watches, and you can say whatever you want and do whatever you want, and you can film, like you can get it filmed, like you can film it yourself, you don't have to pay for a production crew or anything like that, and you can do all that for free, would you want it? And like the whole room was like, oh my god, yes. And he's like, it's called YouTube.
Yes. Yeah. And I think like that is just the truest thing ever. Media until now has been so in the hands of other people. Like, if you get featured in a magazine, like, it's up to the editor, it's up to the journalist. Like, you can do an interview and they can splice it up and make it into whatever they want it to be. Like, having social media, we can self-promote, we can say exactly it is what we want to say, and we can continue to change that, and we can show evolution, and we can have a change of opinion, believe it or not. Like, we can say one thing one week and then be like, do you know what? I actually educated myself and I feel differently now. And then I can say how I feel now. And then the next week after, I could do the same. And like, whether that opinion is like, I prefer copper or green, you know, like, oh, this week I prefer green. Sorry, I actually really now love blue. And we have the ability to do that, and we can evolve and change, and we can connect through that evolution. And in a business sense, we've never had the like more tools to be self-sufficient. I was actually talking to my partner about this last night, about how like our parents' generation and the generation before would never have dreamed of like starting a business or like doing something that was outside of the norm. Like, you did what was in your village or like what you could see your family doing. And now it's like, I can actually see what everyone is doing ever, which is very overwhelming, but it means that I can find my own idols and people who I want to be like. So like, I could connect with Kelly Catrone on Twitter when like my mum would never know who Kelly Catrone is because she doesn't live in Swansea, you know? So it's like, you have to think about it like that sometimes, and you know, appreciate that we are like all little grains of sand, but we have the most amazing ability to run our own businesses and have our own advertising and say whatever we want and post whatever we want, within reason. That's not for you crazies, that's not for you. Internet trolls, no, I was not talking to you, I was talking to the creative people. But yeah, it's like, what an amazing time. But also, I think if you are feeling that sense of like overwhelmedness, like I don't have time and I don't know what to post and I feel this like sense of dread, put it down. Like, the most amazing thing about social media, you can turn it off and just like rain check it. Like, I can come back to that in a couple of days when I feel energized and I'm back feeling lucky and grateful and I want to share and I want to create. Like, if you don't want to create, you can literally put your phone in a drawer and no one's going to stop you. It's fine. It's fine. The world goes on. It's fine.
I love that. That's so good. Oh my gosh, thank you. So that's like, from a PR person, hearing you can put your phone in a drawer and it's fine. The world, and you can pick it back up again and it's fine.
Yeah.
That's such a nice thing to hear.
Yeah. I always say to everyone, like my friends, people I work with, like, and this sounds like a negative, but it's not, it's a positive. No one cares. Like, no one cares. Babe, you can not post for a week. No one cares. You can post every day. No one cares. So it's like, you can do whatever you want and you can put out whatever you want. And like, obviously, people love to see it. But once they've seen your post, like, life goes on. So if you don't want to post or you don't feel like doing something, or you're just posting to keep up with a schedule, like, just remember that no one cares. And I think people, I do it myself. If I feel a bit like, oh, I don't know if I should post this, I'm embarrassed, or like, I don't know if it's good enough or whatever, I just remind myself that absolutely no one cares. And then I hit post and I'm chill about it. It's great.
That's such good advice. Because, like, I don't know, your feed is probably completely different to mine, but my feed is full of very overproduced, over-edited content.
Yeah.
So then it feels like to just make one reel at a decent standard, it's going to take me hours to find the right sticker, to get the right music, to chop it all up, to like zoom in and zoom out, and all those sorts of things, and be hilariously funny and be educational, all in a 30-second social media clip. Feels like a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think I really struggled with this in the sort of beginning of TikTok because I was like, I don't know, like I can't create this like 4K fabulousness, like as you said, with all the editing and the different angles and like everything. But I think you have to find what is really easy for you, and what it has to tick a few boxes. Like you have to enjoy making it. It can't be a burden on you, and it has to be something that you can do like fairly easily. Like some people can do the whole like 5 camera angles and editing very easily. Like it comes very naturally to them. Whereas like I probably have about 10 minutes in a day to make a video, so I need to find something that's quick. Something like, I'll give a practical example because I'm very aware, like sometimes we talk about things and we give our like opinion on it, and then someone's looking at it and they're like, but what does that actually mean? So for example, like where I'm sitting now, I'm in my office, like you're on my little desk, and I have my light here that does not move. Like this is just part of my computer setup. Like I have a little light here and I have my phone here, and it goes in the same place every time. So if I have a little idea in the middle of the day to create a video on something, I can 3, 2, 1 go, and that video's done in 10 seconds because I do the same thing every time. Like if anyone follows me on Instagram, I randomly like show my outfits. How embarrassing. I have to remind myself that no one cares every time I post. I'm like, this is the most embarrassing thing I've done today. But my point is I have a little ledge in my kitchen where I put my coffee mug and then I rest my phone against it, and it's the same setup every time. So if I want to show my outfit, that's where I do it. I grab my coffee cup, I put my phone. There's a big window behind, so there's lots of natural light. So it's all set up for me. So I can make these videos and I can post these things, and it's no burden to me at all. And I think when that comes to a hairdresser perspective, we get these like really overproduced videos, and that's great. But I will say 9 times out of 10, those people are being paid to be content creators. And I think there's a slight level difference between being paid for things and then just like creating your organic content. And obviously it is chicken and egg because you want the brands to be attracted to your content to then pay you. You know, it's circular. But I think hairdressers who do it really well, like there is an amazing girl called Lulu, who is ex Not Another Salon, and she cuts a lot of mullets. And like when you look at someone like her TikTok, like it's basically the same camera setup every time. Like you can tell her, she puts her phone in the same place. You can tell she's just doing the cut. She like boop 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 edits it together, puts some nice music over the top, and you're done. Like it's not to diminish like the work that goes into her content, but there's other hairdressers as well who do those like consultation videos where you're like sat in the consultation with them and they're like speaking to their client, and then you see a little bit of the process and then you see the end, and it's like you can tell that phone was just there recording the whole time. Like they're not doing anything extra. So yeah, I wanted to give some like practical examples so people can actually think like, oh, I have a space that I can do that. And I do not mean a flower wall, guys. That's not what I mean. It's not what I mean. It's like having that place where you have like a bit of light, you can pop your camera, it's not invasive, you're all good, and it's very easy. And I think finding that takes some time to find. It's a bit of experimenting, but once you found your like formula, it's number one, it's easy, and number two, when people are scrolling on TikTok, like because they see this, like they know it's me straight away. Like they know what kind of thing it's going to be. Like when you see me standing in my kitchen, I'm not about to start talking to you. I'm going to show you my outfit, and you like you know that straight away. There's a visual cue. So yeah, hopefully some small nuggets of that was helpful. But yeah, I
That's
get it. It's
really
super hard. It's hard.
That's really helpful. And what is it that brands are looking like? What are you looking for when you're looking through people's videos? Does it need to be super edited, or can it be more natural and organic?
I think, and this is like such a waffly answer, like how I just said, how I like to give really practical examples and then I give the most like general example to this, but it has to add value in some way. And that doesn't always have to be like really over edited, over produced. Sometimes I will say I actively avoid that, because think about how the brand is going to use that content. So if you post something with one of my brands in it, if I can take that and like reshare it or, you know, use it in some way, I need that to do well on my page if I'm going to do like a repost situation, which I know not everyone agrees with, but I do. So if I'm going to do like a repost situation, I need to think like, oh, that video is going to do well on my page. And 9 times out of 10, when you have a super edited, super overproduced video, they don't actually work that well. Because I think people see the level of production and their brain automatically thinks it's an ad and they dismiss it, like subconsciously. I think you see overproduction and you're like, oh, sponsored post, bye. So it doesn't always work that way. But if I have a video where someone is like giving me value. So say for example, like, well, I have this product here, it's for this hair type and it does this, this and this. Like that's giving value. So then if I repost it, that's going to do really well on my page. So I always think about it in that way, like who's providing value, and that can mean lots of different things. But it doesn't have to be like over edited content. Like if I want to, as a brand, if I want to create over edited content, I'm going to make my own, because I can have full control. I can do it in a studio. I can have my own brief, my own story. It's going to look exactly as I want it to look like. How I want to work with people is I want personality and I want value, which as a brand, I can't generate on my own. I need your help. So what are you giving me in that way? Yeah, like I've started gifting consumer influencers on TikTok who the only thing I look for is strength of community. So I don't care if you're literally holding your phone in bed, like telling me a story and it's the grainiest, fuzziest thing ever. But if I feel you have a strong sense of community, like, and it makes sense in that way, you're adding value, like I'm going to send you a PR box, you know?
That's amazing. There was something, I'm going to quote you. There was something you said on your podcast, and you were saying about, you were talking about a bottle of shampoo, and you were saying a bottle of shampoo doesn't have any personality or something like that, or like that the
Yeah.
hairdressers are like people and we have lots of people sat in our chairs and we can create like all this like interest and story and everything else, which for brands they have a bottle of shampoo, like
Yeah,
we've got all the good
literally.
stuff.
Absolutely. And it comes back to, I like this because we're doing a lot of like full circle moments, I feel like unintentionally. So back to when I was talking about how we choose brands and we choose products, how we choose friends. Like if you literally have a shampoo bottle, like what is friendly about that? Like there's nothing to it, you know, like there has to be more. And obviously like there is branding and aesthetic and all that jazz, but when you inject people into the mix, all of a sudden you're creating a tribe. And you can't do that without actual people with actual stories and like opinions and, you know, quirks, and there has to be all that to it. Otherwise, like we live in a world that's so oversaturated. Like we're oversaturated with products, we're oversaturated with social media, we're oversaturated with influencers. So how do we pick? Like there has to be point of difference. And I can't stand there with a bottle of shampoo and expect people to be like, oh my God, so different, so innovative. Like it's not going to happen. So, you know, we have to work with people and we have to build that tribe, and then we have to like show the rest of the world and like potential clients and potential customers, like this is our tribe. Like if you vibe with this, you'll vibe with us. Like, you know, it's just about creating a party at the end of the day.
I love that. That's so good. So I have a couple more questions. I don't want to keep you forever, but
We could go all day.
I just want to talk to you forever. I feel like I'm using up your very valuable time.
Oh.
So one of the things I really, really wanted to ask you, which I feel like you've answered, but if you could just do like a quick roundup of it, what would be your like top 5 PR tips for hairdressers?
I mean, there's one thing about me that I don't answer anything quickly ever, as we know, because you've just sat through an hour of me talking. Okay, top 5 things. I think you need to be really, really honest, really know who you are, be very genuine in your approach. I think you need to be super flexible and changeable and welcoming evolution. And I think you need to be unserious. But in terms of like actual tips, my main tip, I'm actually gonna do this in one. Can you believe I'm about to? This is psychotic. You've given me 5, and I'm like, I need one. My main piece of advice is I always say, this probably isn't my phrase, but I use it in like every presentation and like coin it as my own. So I'm probably gonna get sued at some point. But I always say, test, take stock, and evolve. So like if I'm posting something on social media, I'm posting it, I'm paying attention to how it does, and then whether it's good or bad, that's how I make my next decision. And I think that applies to everything. Content creation, press, social media, like anything you do within a PR world, never ever be afraid of something failing, because that means that you've learned something from it. And if you never put anything out in the first place, you don't have an opportunity to learn. So you have to have this very like throwaway mentality. Like, you know, the saying of like news will be tomorrow's like fish and chip paper. It's very that, like, just put it out and see what happens. And it doesn't, this, like, when you're doing a post on Instagram, it's not your memoir. Like, it's not like your legacy and how you will be remembered. It's a 30-second reel. Like, just put it out, see how it does, and then learn from it. And I think if you apply that to everything you do in life, in your career, from a PR perspective, you'll always be fine, and you'll always be doing, like, you'll be heading towards the right direction. Yeah, just testing, lots of testing. You literally can't fail by being open in that way.
That's such good advice. Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Katie.
You're so welcome.
So, can I find out like how people can work with you and what you've got coming up?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Katie Braden PR. Also, I have a website, How Ancient of Me, which has like a breakdown of what I do, services, etc. I feel for people listening to this podcast, the most like applicable thing would be the publicist package, to which I have a highlight, again, how ancient of me, on my Instagram that shows like what it is, everything included, and like all the information. My podcast is also linked on my Instagram, but it has its own Instagram page at the PR Department Podcast. You can find it on Apple Podcasts. And yeah, I'm basically just like vibing and doing my podcast and working on my clients. And I'm in a very like where she goes, nobody knows vibe of life at the moment. So yeah, watch this space, I suppose.
Yeah. That's so good, because for people who are just starting out and who are, maybe just want to get a few more clients and are happy to spend the time and DIY it, your podcast is insane and it gives so much advice. But then you've got that entry level publicist package where people can actually get some real serious help with working out who they are and have you as their like, I love that you're like a connector or a town crier, because
Yeah.
as hairdressers, what we really, really want more than anything is for our client, once we've done their hair, to go to the pub and tell every single person at the pub where they've just got their hair done and how
Yeah.
amazing their hairdresser is. But 99.9% of the time that doesn't happen.
Yeah. I know what you mean, and I still strongly, strongly believe in the power of word of mouth. I think it's the most powerful marketing tool. Like sometimes I like want to engage someone, like someone on Instagram in an activity, and I'll say to the client like, "Oh, they've got like 2,000 followers or something," which like in the grand scheme of things is not very much. And they're like, "Why would you want to engage them?" And I'm like, "They move in this circle of people, and like I want them to be like talking about it at dinner." Like that's how like conniving we are as PRs. Like we want to like tap into like social circles, because I still believe like as much as we have access to press and social media and all these amazing things, word of mouth is still so strong. But I, for one, this is not a good example because I'm sitting here with a slick back bun, but like I get asked all the time, like, who does your color, like who's doing your hair, like who cuts your hair, oh my god, blah 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 blah. And I will like say constantly, like I will name drop exact products I'm using, like I will say like who's doing my hair. I'll always like tag them in like social media stuff, like where it's appropriate. Yeah. And I think as long as you create a really beautiful experience for that person, like they'll remember it and they'll repeat it. Yeah, it's just about like being a good service provider, I suppose.
Yeah. But then you're there as a helping hand to get them further. Like maybe the client thing is a bad example. Maybe the better thing is you post something on social media and you really want someone to go, hey, look at this post Laura did. It took her ages and it looks really good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that really comes back to like having that really defined like personal voice and point of difference, because no one's going to say that about your post that they've seen 30 times from 30 other hairdressers. Like to them it's just another whatever, like color transformation that's like done in exactly the same way as like everybody else. Like no one's going to reshare that. It took you 5 hours and no one cares. So yeah, it is just like really being honest and being refined, and I feel like that is going to get the people talking and people resharing, because it actually is, there's something to share, there's something to say. Like I always say that to everyone, it's so obvious. I'm like, what are we saying? Like what is it that we're saying? Because otherwise it's just nothing, isn't it?
Yeah. Katie, thank you so much. I really appreciate this time you've given and all the value and all the advice that you've given to everybody.
You're so
Anyone
welcome.
who's oh wow, I want to do it again now. Now I want to do it again.
More.
So if anyone listening to this, if you're at the gym or if you're driving your car, stop and find some time in your calendar to work out who you are, what you want and why you want it, and do a bit of deep soul searching.
Yeah,
So anything
I would highly recommend shower time and Sunday mornings. Just saying.
that's a really good one.
Yeah, my shower time is good.
Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Thank you to everybody who's listened. I feel like you've just changed some people's lives. I know you've changed mine, and I know I'm probably going to listen to this 100 times now with a notepad and make notes.
Hopefully, I mean, if I can just give like a tiny little bit of value, I feel like that's kind of like my purpose in life, is just to like give little nuggets and sprinkle a little bit of like PR dust on people's days, and if you take one thing, then that's like good for me.
I feel like people will take more than one. I do.
It's a good day.
I have. Thank you so much, Katie.
Thank you.
We'll say goodbye now. Thank you for everybody for joining in, and we'll speak to you soon.